Why was an innocent girl married to 4 aged men? The cruelty done by those ruthless individuals on the girl was horrible enough to make anyone's soul shiver. Today's story is a heartbreaking tale of an innocent girl's suffering. If you hear this story, it will surely bring tears to your eyes. This is the tragic account of a 20-year-old girl who endured unspeakable torment. The girl, trembling and crying uncontrollably, managed to reach Sultan Salad's court at the time. During the session, while the Sultan was listening to his citizens' grievances, the girl cried so hard that she fainted and lost consciousness before she could say anything. Sultan Salamid jumped up, greatly concerned, wondering what grief had brought this girl to such a state. The courtiers there were also anxious, and when they saw her condition, the Sultan immediately ordered his guards to spray water on her face to revive her so they could understand her situation. A Hakim physician was summoned shortly. Hakim checked her pulse and said that the girl was extremely weak and had collapsed due to exhaustion. After a while, she recovered consciousness but began wailing again. Sultan Salamat gently placed his hand on her head and said, "Do not be afraid, young girl. You are standing in my court where no injustice will be tolerated. Tell us what troubles you." The Sultan then offered her a seat, and a servant brought her some water, after which the girl gazed to Sultan Salamat and said, "O Sultan, I have come to you with my tale of sorrow." Tears flowed down her face as she cried, "O Sultan, my life is in great danger. Please save me, or they will tear me apart for so long." The girl wept bitterly in front of everyone. The entire court became hushed, ready to hear her narrative. Sultan Salamat softly placed his hand on her head again and whispered, "Speak, my child, and tell us your story in detail. Tell us what has occurred to you." The girl proceeded to narrate her terrible story. "O Sultan Salamat, I was only 10 years old when my parents were still together. My mother frequently cried and told me that your father is an alcoholic who insults me, beats me, and is not a good man. At the time, I was too young to understand her words. My parents fought every day, and one day their argument became so heated that my father clearly and irrevocably divorced my mother by pronouncing talaq 3 times. From that point forward, my mother was no longer his wife. After the divorce, my mother said to me, 'Daughter, I cannot stay here anymore. Your father has divorced me. Let's leave this place and go somewhere else.' She took me with her. But I cried and pleaded, 'Mother, I want to stay with both of you.' My mother replied, 'My dear child, if your father only hurt me or insulted me, I could have tolerated it. But now he has divorced me. I cannot live with him anymore. Your father is not a good man. Come with me, my child.' The girl continued, 'My mother, then?' When we arrived at the house, my uncle said, 'Sister, you are welcome to stay with me, but I cannot allow your daughter to stay here. She has grown into a young woman now, and I have 4 grown sons in this house. If anything happens, the villagers will convene a council, and I cannot afford to tarnish my reputation. So, sister, you can stay here, but your daughter cannot.' Hearing this, my mother wept bitterly and said, 'My dear daughter, I am helpless. I cannot keep you with me, my mother.' Father's house and left me there. She went back to live with her brother. I cried when I saw my father. He placed his hand on my head and assured me, 'Do not worry, my daughter, your father is here for you.' At that moment, I began to believe that perhaps my father wasn't as bad as my mother had described him, but I was a naive and innocent girl, unable to understand the complexities of good and bad. I began living with my father, and over time I saw that late at night, women would come to my father's room, lock the door, and leave. Dawn, I didn't understand what was going on because I was too young and innocent to comprehend anything. In the mornings, as the day began, my father would hand some money to those women and they would leave. Despite this, my father treated me very kindly every day. He would ask me, 'Daughter, what would you like to eat today, and what should we cook at that time?' I thought my father was good to me, but I couldn't see the wider picture. Everything appeared confused to me. Thus 16 years passed at my father's house until I turned 16. My father arranged my marriage to one of his friends. This man was much older than me, but I accepted it without protest because I believed that a husband is meant to care for his wife and a wife should respect her husband. I embraced the relationship wholeheartedly, resolving to keep my husband happy regardless of the age difference between us. After the wedding, my husband took me to his home 2 days later. I was cooking when my husband returned from outside and asked, "How was your day? Where did you go?" Hearing this, he became furious. He slapped me hard across my face. I was a young and fragile girl, unable to endure such a blow. I broke down into tears, terrified of him and shocked by his reaction. He scolded me harshly, saying, "How dare you question me about where I was?" He added, "I despise wives who interfere in their husbands' lives. Therefore, I am divorcing you." He then pronounced the triple talaq, ending our marriage instantly. "Go back," said I, grieved terribly, questioning myself. What was my crime? Was it improper for me to ask how his day went or where he had been? I wondered if this was indeed such a grievous offense, but what could I do once he divorced me? I became haram banned to him, leaving him with no other option. I returned to my father's house devastated and despondent, crying hysterically. I arrived to my father's house and told him everything I had said about my husband's brutal divorce of me. My father placed his palm on my head and said, "Daughter, perhaps your husband was not a good man. That's why he divorced you. Allah will hold him accountable for his actions." After saying this, my father walked away. His indifferent behavior deeply hurt me. I couldn't help but think, wasn't it his responsibility to confront that man and ask, "Why did you divorce my daughter?" Still, I chose to remain silent and stayed quietly at my father's house. My father kept repeating, "Your husband wasn't a good person. Allah will deal with him." I stopped paying my. In Islam, when a woman is divorced or her husband dies, she must observe a waiting period of 4 months and 10 days known as iddat. When my iddat period ended 4 months and 10 days later, my father arranged another marriage for me. I clasped my hands in front of him and pleaded that it's only been 5 and 1/2 months since my divorce, and I still haven't overcome the pain of losing my first husband. How can I marry again? But my father ignored my plea. Said, "Not all husbands are the same. You will find happiness with this one." With that, he arranged my second marriage. I moved to my new husband's house. He kept me with him for 3 days, and on the 4th day, he divorced me for no reason. Once again, I was abandoned. Now I carried the stigma of being divorced twice. I returned to my father's house and told him everything, but he paid no attention to my pain. Once more, I was made to observe the iddat period. After completing the 4-month, Father said, "I have arranged a third marriage for you. You must move forward and build your life by now." Now I was so broken by the repeated injustices that I fell to my knees before my father and pleaded, "Father, please forgive me. Save me from these men. Don't marry me off again. I can no longer bear this cruelty. Why are you forcing me into marriage over and over? If I have become a burden to you, then leave me in an orphanage. But Father, I beg you to have mercy on me. These men marry me, take me to their homes, use my body for 2 or 3 days, and then throw me away. If this next man does the same, stays with me for 2 days, and then divorces me, what will I do? Don't ruin my life." I begged my father, but he yelled in anger, "You must get married or your fate will be even worse." Hearing such horrible comments from my father, I became mute. What could I do? My father arranged my third marriage and sent me to the house of another man, but this man was worse than the first 2. I was shocked by his cruelty and wondered how every husband I married was progressively more ruthless. My third husband was not only older, but extremely abusive. He would beat me over minor issues, often so severely that blood would drip from my nose and mouth. My nights passed in agony and my days were filled with tears. I resigned myself to the thought that this suffering was my destiny, that I was born only to endure humiliation. He insulted me constantly, bringing up my previous husbands. He would sneer, "Husbands touch you afterward." He would burn my skin with hot cold s. I would cry and beg him, folding my hands in desperation, "Please, don't do this to me. I cannot endure this," I pleaded. But the more I cried, the more his cruelty intensified. I endured this torture for some time until one day he also divorced me with talaq. Now I bore the shame of being divorced 3 times. The young woman recounted this heart-wrenching tale, weeping before Sultan Solomon's court. Everyone present was moved to their eyes filled with sorrow for her plight. Crying, the woman said to the Sultan, "After my third divorce, I returned to my father's house. He immediately began arranging my fourth marriage. It was then that the truth became clear to me. I folded my hands before him and pleaded, 'Please forgive me. Do not humiliate my life further.' But my father coldly replied, 'I have spent a lot of money raising you. Where else will I recover that money if I don't marry you off when my father arranged?' Marriage to an elderly man, the truth finally unfolded. The man gave my father 3 pouches filled with goods. At that moment I realized that my father had made similar transactions during my previous marriages. I understood then that my father had been selling me under the guise of marriage, using my dignity to earn money. When he sent me away for the 4th time, I resolved to come to the Sultan and tell my story in my first 3 marriages. I had been too naive to see my father's true intentions. By the time I entered my 4th marriage, I finally understood everything. I realized that my father was selling me off under the guise of marriage. The elderly man I was married to was even more cruel than my previous 3 husbands. He tortured me so much that I felt neither alive nor dead. There was not a single moment of peace in my life. One day, when my endurance reached its limit, I spoke out against him, and he divorced me, grabbed my hand, and dropped me off. Home. I now fully understood that my father had been selling me under the name of marriage and trading my honor before I was naive and clueless, but now everything was clear to me. Desperate, I went to the Sultan crying and said my father now goes so far as inviting men into the house daily to trade my honor. I am destroyed. O Sultan, please help me. Hearing the girl's painful story, the Sultan became furious. He reassured her, "My child, do not worry. We will surely help you." The Sultan then directed the girl to return to your father's house. "I will send my minister with you. He will accompany you secretly so that your father remains unaware." The minister returned to the girl's house with her and hid in the room where she stayed. The Sultan also stationed guards outside the house, but no one inside had any knowledge of it. The minister stayed hidden in the girl's room. Later the girl's father came and said, "Wear these clothes, dress beautifully, and sit here." After some time, a man entered the girl's room and attempted to. The minister emerged from his hiding place. Seeing the minister, the man was shocked and asked, "Who are you?" The minister drew his dagger and struck the man's foot, causing a loud scream to echo from the girl's room. Hearing the scream, the girl's father and the guards outside quickly rushed into the room. Upon entering, the father was stunned to see the minister standing there. The guards captured both the man and the girl's father and brought them along with the girl to the Sultan. Sternly demanded answers from everyone. The girl's father confessed to his crimes. Admitting that he had subjected his own daughter to immense cruelty, he had handed her over to merciless husbands who abused her and divorced her without reason. The Sultan decreed severe punishments for all the culprits. The girl's father was publicly hanged in the town square, and women were ordered to pelt him with stones until his death. The abusive husbands were thrown into prison without cause. Dying from hunger and thirst, going to the girl, the Sultan calmed her, saying, "My child, if you wish, you can stay in this palace. Whatever you need, let me know and I will help you." But upon hearing these words, the girl collapsed. Royal physicians went to her aid and informed the Sultan that this girl had undergone terrible anguish from her wounds. Run-deep survival until now has been a miracle. Despite our best efforts, we could not save her life. The girl breathed her last, leaving everyone stunned. In profound grief, the court grieved her, pondering on how much anguish and pain she must have kept within her heart, and how she carried those wounds with her to the grave. So the story of this brave child came to an end. If we compare this to today's times, we still get reports of such awful tragedies that break our hearts to the core. Somewhere, a 9-year-old child undergoes unimaginable anguish, while numerous innocent people suffer. Possibly the moral of the story: injustice. Even today, we witness cruel individuals playing with the dignity of innocent girls without an ounce of shame. This story is from an ancient time, but similar incidents still serve as lessons for us friends. I hope today's story has taught you something valuable. If you found it meaningful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so that Musa Voice can continue bringing you more educational and heart-touching inspiration. My Vita, thank you for sharing your stories.